alert. The liberal media and Democrats caught pushing a false narrative yet again. Surprise, surprise. After an inspector general report debunks claims that then President Trump ordered protesters to be cleared from Lafayette Park outside the White House last summer for a photo op. That was never the case. This is Outnumbered. I'm Kayleigh McEnany, and here today my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Emily Campagno, Fox News contributor Leslie Marshall, and joining us in the virtual center seat for the very first time, my former colleague and friend, Ben Ferguson, host of the Ben Ferguson podcast. Welcome all. We're now learning that police cleared Lafayette Park before they knew about President Trump's plans last June to walk through the park and pose in front of St. John's Church with a Bible, a church protesters had tried to burn down the previous night. The IG found that park police cleared the park to allow for new fencing to be installed. The report concludes, quote, "The evidence showed that the U.S. Park Police did not know about the president's potential movement until mid to late afternoon on June 1st, hours after it had been developing its operational plan and the fencing contractor had arrived in the park." Stunning. But at the time, major news outlets were in a fury, saying President Trump actually ordered the tear gassing of protesters. That's exactly right, and they ignored the fact that, as you noted, federal law enforcement was having frozen water bottles and brick thrown at them at this time. But Leslie, coming to you, I want to play a soundbite of Democrats who continued to perpetuate the false leftist media narrative as well. Let's roll tape.
Peaceful protesters dispersed in order for a president from the doorstep of the people's house, the White House, using tear gas and flash grenades in order to stage a photo op in one of the most historic churches in the country.
Biden, Kamala, Pelosi, all wrong, Leslie. Where's the accountability?
Well, if you look historically at politicians, they will often believe what is put out there because, like I've said before, journalists are supposed to report the facts. This is why it's good to have independent investigations, because you get to the truth perhaps after the fact. We've seen that with Iraq and WMDs. We've seen that with Benghazi, and oh no, it wasn't Hillary. Even Republicans said, oh no, it wasn't Hillary. And this time, no, it wasn't Donald Trump. It was the park police. But there are two things here, Kayleigh. One, the park police should have stepped up and said, this was our call, because it was their call. And the president kept getting accused. You even had people asking you that. And somebody from the park police, the leader of the park police, should have come out and said, hey, this is on us. And secondly, this report does not clear the park police for the use of force and the type of response that they had if you read it in its entirety. I think these types of reports are good, and sadly, they always are after the fact. Hindsight is 20/20. But optics are huge. And if it's not just the media, but if you're watching it on TV and you have this belief, whether it's left to right or right to left, it's easy, even for our elected officials, to jump on board with the same narrative.
Staggering new numbers on the crisis at our southern border. Fox News has just gotten this video as well of illegal immigrants making their way across the Rio Grande. Last month alone, encounters surged past 180,000 with people trying to get into our country, the most in more than 2 decades. But since the fiscal year began 8 months ago, nearly 1 million of them have been apprehended, more than double in the last fiscal year. And we still have 4 more months to go in this one. Great job on our friend Sean, so we could hear maybe a little bit of what the vice president must have learned that got her to leave the office there, Leslie, and say, oh, tell them not to come, no matter what her boss's policy is. Do you think anybody's listening to Kamala Harris on this, trying to make their way to the United States?
I do, but what I really see here, and yo hablo español, so what I really see... What I really see here is a man who wants to blame everybody but the real source in Guatemala of the problem, and he is a huge source of that problem. Poverty. Over half of the people in his country live in poverty, and that has increased since he took office. In addition to that, there is a food shortage in that country. He is not taking care of his people, and that is one of the reasons that they continue to come to the United States. They did before, they do now. And I find it interesting that he's slamming this administration who is giving him money that was originally in 2019, had a pause put on, and he has his hands held out, but he is not dealing with the drug cartels. He is not dealing
Leslie,
with the poverty and the food shortage and the unemployment in his country, and that is the reason the people are leaving. He is not taking care of his own people. He should not be blaming it on any leader from any other nation. He needs to look in the mirror.
Give me 1 second. I want to go back to Leslie for just a moment, because with a very tender heart, Leslie has told us about her own story, her own family, and how immigration has touched you. When you hear the Vice President of the United States telling people not to come, and you know the situation is as dire as what you just said, what would you want to say to the VP? Got to be quick, because I want to get to Emily and Kaylee.
Oh, a couple of things. If you just look at the treacherous journey and the death and the advantage that these coyotes take, they take these people's money, and a lot of people don't make it to the other side. But I do want to quickly respond to Ben. Ben, if that is the reason they are coming here, because of the Biden message, when Joe Biden wasn't president for the past 4 years, and it wasn't the Democrats' message that prevailed, they were still coming. The problem is within that country. It is multifaceted, but it's multifaceted. That is one of the problems, Ben, and there's no way my party intentionally wants people to come here, and there is no amnesty. There is a pathway to citizenship for those who are already here, and certainly
I want to jump to Kaylee now.
That was Dr. Anthony Fauci going after his critics, referring to himself in the third person as he claims he has always simply followed the science. But critics point to Fauci's history of flip-flopping on key issues during the pandemic. For example, his guidance on wearing masks. And don't forget his evolving opinion on the origins of COVID-19. Leslie, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I have many, and I know you all hate when I say I'm married to a physician, but here's one of the things that doctors have issues with we, the non-doctors, the patients. They're not gods, and they don't always know all the answers. There are a lot of theories, hypotheses, things that aren't proven, and things that are fluid. Now, certainly with COVID, that was the case, not just for Fauci, but for the entire international medical community. As more information came in, he would give that information. He would refer to the CDC. Let me just say this. Eggs. We were told eggs were good for you. Then we were told eggs were bad for us. Then we were told just eat the whites. Now the yellow is good too. The yolk is good too. Do we fire all the cardiologists? I don't think Dr. Fauci should be fired, because medicine, research, technology, viruses like COVID are ever changing. They are fluid, and doctors' answers to our questions will be as well. They're not gods. They're people who study medicine and science.
Fox News alert. Criminals have stolen about half of the country's unemployment benefits since the pandemic began. A fraud prevention group tells Fox Business the culprits have swindled more than $400 billion in taxpayer money. We're also learning that about $250 billion of that money went to, get this, state-backed crime syndicates in China, Russia, and other countries. Wow. Yeah, there were no choices. In fact, the states disseminated the funding, so you were really you were dependent on 50 different states who had different processes for distributing this money. But Leslie, should this not be a cautionary tale that, look, there was a time and a place for this? People were hurting amid COVID-19 pandemic, but should we really have trillions and trillions of dollars of FDR-like government handouts as President Biden wants?
President Biden actually said that he agrees with you on this, Kaylee, that this should expire in September, that there is a time and a place. I do want to point out something you said, Kaylee, because I do agree with you when you look at the states. Here in California, because I host a talk show, a lot of people contacted us that were having trouble getting their unemployment checks because they had to be verified through ID Me, and one of the individuals who gave this information has been interviewed for this is the CEO, Blake Hall, who I actually spoken to, and he was very helpful. Here's what happened. When they discovered that there was fraud, and a lot more than they thought there would be, they then had people go through a very rigorous verification process. And here's the problem. Those people out there in other countries, the bad guys, they really know tech a lot better than some of these people, who may not be computer whizzes, myself included. And a lot of the problem also came, ID Me just didn't even have, he said, this is unbelievable, the volume of people that we have to verify. I just don't have the time. I don't have the employees, and there weren't enough of those ID Me organizations as well. So
Yes.
once again, yeah, I don't think they knew how bad the fraud would be, and I think the president's right. September is time for us to look at that, and hopefully more of COVID in our rearview mirror.
Latest consequences over the controversial liberal bail reform as a known gang member got out of jail when a Bronx judge drastically reduced his bail from $75,000 to $10,000. This despite the fact that Alberto Ramirez had 3 prior gun busts in 4 months. And while on bail, the New York Post reports Ramirez was arrested again, this time accused of murdering an innocent dad of 2 who was shot when police claim Ramirez walked onto rival gang territory and fired blindly into the crowd. By the way, lowering that bail puts it in his hands, Emily, because it's 10% of that he has to come up with, not that whole amount, is what I was reading. Say his name. Leslie.
You know, the reason they wanted to eliminate cash bail in reformation in different states, New York and others, even Kentucky, by the way, is because a rich kid could pay cash and get out for the same crime that a poor kid, and it affected disproportionately people of color. The problem here is it was originally for nonviolent offenders and misdemeanors, and then the decision would be made by the judge. So it does come down to the judge in many states. Emily correctly pointed out New York may be different than California, but if we really go back to the origin of this, then it could be beneficial to level the playing field.